In the time it takes a government committee to schedule a meeting about artificial intelligence, a model has already been trained, deployed, and used by 100 million people. The European Union spent 4 years drafting the AI Act. OpenAI released three major model generations in that same window. By the time the ink was dry, the law was written for no longer existed. This isn't a story about bad regulation. It's a story about structural impossibility. And today we're going to show you why the gap between AI capability and legal authority may have already passed the point of no return. The story of AI regulation starts not with ChatGPT, but with a decision made decades earlier. In the United States, the dominant regulatory philosophy for emerging technology has always been the same. Innovate first, regulate later. It worked, sort of, for the internet. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act gave platforms immunity from user content. That one law shaped the entire architecture of social media, and it wasn't updated for 20 years. When lawmakers finally turned their attention to AI, they discovered the same problem regulators always discover too late. The industry had already written the rules. Not through corruption, not necessarily through malice, but because in a vacuum of governance, the people building the technology become the default authority on how it should be used. The vocabulary, the benchmarks, the safety thresholds, they came from labs, not from legislatures. And when you let the industry define the problem, you've already conceded half the argument. Now, Anna, let's talk about what the Western regulatory debate almost always misses. The European Union's AI Act is the most comprehensive AI legislation on the planet. It runs to over 100 articles. It classifies AI systems by risk tier. It requires audits, transparency reports, and human oversight for high-risk systems. And it applies in full to companies that want to operate in the EU. But what about the 135 countries that have no binding AI legislation at all? In sub-Saharan Africa, AI systems are already being deployed in credit scoring, healthcare triage, and predictive policing. Without audit requirements, without liability frameworks, without any external accountability, the companies building these systems aren't rogue actors. Many are the same firms that face rigorous oversight in Europe. But when they cross a border into a jurisdiction with no regulatory teeth, oversight becomes optional. This is the regulation asymmetry. The most powerful AI is regulated where it's least needed, in wealthy, high-capacity democracies, and deployed without constraint where the consequences are hardest to reverse. China's approach to AI governance isn't less regulation, it's different regulation. Beijing has published detailed rules on generative AI, algorithm recommendations, and deepfakes. But those rules are designed to protect state authority, not individual rights. What you get globally is a trilemma. Western democracies regulate for rights, but slowly. Authoritarian states regulate for control, but comprehensively. And the developing world? It gets whatever regulatory model arrives first, usually from whoever builds its infrastructure. Even if every government passed perfect AI legislation tomorrow, there are three structural failures that no law has come close to solving. Failure 1. Jurisdictional fragmentation. AI models are trained in one country, hosted in another, accessed globally, and accountable to no single legal framework. A model trained on servers in the United States, fine-tuned by a contractor in Eastern Europe, deployed through an API to a hospital in Southeast Asia. Who regulates that? Every layer involves different legal systems, different liability standards, and different definitions of harm. The answer right now is nobody does, not comprehensively. Failure 2, the audit problem. The most powerful AI systems are black boxes, even to their creators. The EU AI Act requires high-risk systems to be explainable. But explainability in a frontier model with hundreds of billions of parameters isn't a feature you can add after the fact. Regulators are being asked to certify systems that the engineers who built them cannot fully explain. That's not a compliance gap. That's an epistemological one. Failure 3, the pace differential. The average legislative cycle runs 18 to 36 months. The average AI model release cycle now runs 6 to 12 months. That means the law is always, structurally, mathematically, at least one generation behind the technology. And with each new capability jump, the regulatory gap doesn't just persist, it widens. You cannot regulate what you cannot understand, and you cannot understand something that changes faster than your institutions can process it. That's not a policy failure. That's an architectural one. So where does this leave us? Three things you should watch because they will determine whether governance catches up or gets left behind permanently. First, watch the liability shift. The most consequential battle in AI regulation isn't about what AI can do. It's about who gets sued when it goes wrong. Right now, liability sits with developers in theory and with users in practice. The moment that flips, the moment a court holds a foundation model lab directly responsible for downstream harm, the entire industry's risk calculus changes overnight. Second, watch the compute choke points. The United States has already moved to restrict advanced AI chip exports, not because of what those chips do today, but because of what they make possible tomorrow. Whoever controls the hardware controls the capability frontier. Export controls are the one form of AI governance that doesn't require a definition of intelligence, just a customs code. Third, watch the treaty negotiations. The first serious multilateral AI governance framework is already being discussed at the United Nations. But unlike nuclear arms control, where you could count warheads, AI capability isn't physically countable. Any treaty will require a verification mechanism that doesn't yet exist. The countries that define that mechanism will define the rules of the game for the next century. The question isn't whether AI will be regulated, it's whether governance will arrive before the systems become ungovernable. Regulation is not dead, but it is running late, and in a race between democratic deliberation and exponential capability growth, late is not a small problem. It may be the defining problem of this decade. If you made it this far, you're not the kind of person who waits for the news to tell them what to think. That's exactly who Breach Protocol Global is built for. We don't cover headlines. We cover what's behind them, the power structures, the technical realities, the decisions being made 3 moves ahead of the news cycle. Subscribe. Drop a comment with what you think governance actually needs to look like. And until next time, while most people are reacting to the news, we're already 3 moves ahead.